One plant in this list has been on the market for over 30 years. Nothing the breeders have introduced since has replaced it in the trial gardens, in the catalog sales figures, or in the yards of the gardeners who found it early and never looked back. That plant is at number 1. The plant at number 2 has been documented blooming for 6 straight months from a single crown without significant intervention. Not 6 months with heavy deadheading and feeding programs, 6 months with 2 cutbacks per season and otherwise being left alone. These are not catalog plants. The catalog wants to sell you what is new. New is not the same as proven. The trial gardens, the institutions that grow hundreds of perennials in controlled conditions across multiple zones and multiple seasons and document which ones actually deliver what the label promises, have a much shorter list than the catalog. And the plants that have been on that trial garden list for decades, the ones that keep appearing in recommendation after recommendation year after year, are the plants worth growing. 13 of them. All of them planted in May. All of them blooming from establishment through the first killing frost. All of them selected specifically because the trial garden record behind them is documented, long, and consistent across the zones and conditions that American gardeners actually garden in. May planting matters for this particular list in a specific way. The trial gardens consistently document that the long-blooming perennials on today's list, the ones that run 5, 6, even 7 months of continuous flower, establish their most productive seasonal performance when planted in warming May soil. The root systems that will sustain months of continuous bloom production develop fastest and most thoroughly in the conditions May provides. A gardener who plants these 13 in May is giving the investment the best possible foundation for the most complete first season performance. Let's get into all 13. Number 13 is Erigeron carvinskianus. Most American gardeners have walked past this plant at the nursery without giving it a second look. The tag reads Mexican fleabane or Santa Barbara daisy. The plant looks modest, small, mat-forming, unremarkable in the pot. And then it goes in the ground and does something that no perennial in the same size category comes close to matching. It flowers for 7 months without stopping. From April or May, depending on the zone, through the first hard frost of November, Erigeron carvinskianus is covered every single day in small daisy flowers that open white, fade through pale pink, and deepen to soft rose before dropping. A continuous 3-tone color shift happening simultaneously across the entire plant. Individual flowers last a few days. The plant produces them in such continuous, relentless succession that bare foliage is almost never visible beneath them during the bloom season. This is the plant that blooms when the daylilies finish, when the coneflowers finish, when astilbe and catmint and salvia are winding down. Erigeron is still going. Hardy in ground zones 7 through 9, with zone 8 for containers. In zones 5 and 6, grow it as an annual or in a container brought inside before hard frost. The placement that shows it best is not a tidy bed. It is the edge of a stone path, the crack between flagstones, the base of a low retaining wall, the gap at the foot of a garden staircase. Erigeron self-seeds gently into exactly those positions, the places where hard edges need softening, and produces 3-foot drifts of nonstop daisy color that make every hard surface in the garden look less imposing and more considered. Plant 3 small divisions in May. By September of the following year, those divisions are a substantial, continuously flowering presence that requires nothing from you beyond the original planting decision. Number 12 is Veronica Royal Candles. 18 inches tall, a tight cushion of glossy green foliage with vertical electric blue flower spikes rising above it like blue candles standing upright from the plant. Bees and small butterflies cluster on every spike every sunny morning from May through July. The color is one of the most genuinely saturated blues available in the American perennial palette. Not purple blue, not violet blue, but a clear electric blue that reads distinctly from across the garden. The trick that converts a 3-month bloomer into a 5-month one is deadheading. Cut the spent spikes back to the foliage cushion when they fade in July. The plant produces a second flush in August, deadhead again, and a third flush follows in September. 5 months of blue from one 18-inch plant with 2 to 3 deadheading sessions per season. Hardy zones 3 through 8, meaning most of the continental United States in the ground. Drought tolerant once established. Deer ignore it. The variety name matters here and matters significantly. There are dozens of named Veronica spicata cultivars, and their performance varies. Royal Candles and Crater Lake Blue are the two with documented track records across American trial gardens. The unnamed Veronica spicata at the garden center may or may not perform the same way. The label is not sufficient. The variety name is what determines the result. Planted in May along a hot, south-facing walkway in lean soil, Royal Candles establishes quickly in warming conditions and begins producing its first blue spikes within weeks of planting, delivering the first flush in its very first season while building the root mass that will make every subsequent season more productive. Number 11 is Calamintha White Cloud. Crush a single leaf between your fingers. The fragrance is pure peppermint, immediate, clean, and surprising from a plant that most American gardeners have never encountered. Calamintha is in the mint family, but carries none of mint's invasive spreading behavior. It is clump-forming, staying exactly where you place it, and that precision, combined with 5 months of continuous bloom, makes it one of the most garden-friendly long bloomers available. It reaches 16 inches tall, and from June through October is covered in clouds of thousands of tiny, pure white flowers held in airy, almost transparent masses above the small, mint-scented leaves. The word cloud is the right one. The flower mass has a lightness and a delicacy that heavier flowered perennials never achieve, and in a border where bold colors need a visual rest, Calamintha provides exactly that quality. Bumblebees and small native bees work it constantly. The Mount Cuba Center, one of the most respected native plant and perennial trial institutions in America, has included Calamintha in its pollinator performance trials. They do not include plants lightly. Hardy zones 5 through 7 with some extension to zone 4 with mulch protection. The specific quality that separates Calamintha from catmint, the plant it is most often compared to, is behavioral precision. Walker's Low catmint spreads. Calamintha doesn't. Plant it exactly where you want it, and it stays there, blooming for 5 months and then returning to exactly the same footprint the following spring. Number 10 is Canadia macedonica, the plant nobody pronounces correctly the first time. It doesn't matter. What matters is what it does from June through September in the border. 4 straight months of small, deep, wine-red pincushion flowers on wiry stems held above gray-green foliage, in a color that almost no other perennial provides. Most perennials bloom yellow, pink, white, or blue. Canadia is the burgundy. That specific deep wine red sits in the border like a jewel, drawing the eye without competing, providing depth and richness that lighter colors around it cannot produce, and working harmoniously with virtually every other color in the summer perennial palette. Hardy zones 5 through 9. Drought tolerant once established. Full sun and lean soil. Fertile soil produces too much vegetative growth and too few flowers, which is the consistent pattern with the toughest long bloomers on this list. It self-seeds gently, and the seedlings are easy to manage. They don't run away from you the way echinacea seedlings can. Worth seeking from specialty perennial nurseries if your local garden center doesn't carry it. The search is worth making. Number 9 is Gora whirling butterflies. Taxonomists reclassified it to Enothera lindheimeri a few years ago. Most gardeners still call it Gora. The plant is the same regardless of what the label says, and whirling butterflies is the variety with the documented bloom record that earns its place on this list. 3 feet tall, with wiry stems carrying small pink and white flowers that look exactly like butterflies hovering above the foliage, and they bounce in the slightest breeze, which gives the planting a continuous, gentle animation that heavier flowered perennials can't replicate. It blooms from May through October in mild climates and June through September in colder zones, delivering 4 to 5 months of that light, airy, butterfly-like display from one plant. Native to Texas and Louisiana, drought-tolerant, heat-tolerant, it performs best in the conditions that challenge most other long bloomers: full sun, lean soil, sharp drainage. Plant it where you would give up on most things, and it will reward that placement with months of the most delicate-looking bloom in the summer border. One honest caution: individual plants are short-lived, typically 3 to 5 years per crown. But it self-seeds lightly, and the daughter plants come up exactly where you would plant new ones. A short-lived perennial that perpetuates itself is functionally a long-lived one. Number 8 is Geum Totally Tangerine. 24 inches tall. Vivid coral orange single flowers on tall, wiry stems above a low rosette of dark green leaves. Blooming from April or May through July with a genuine second flush in September with deadheading. 3 to 4 months of the brightest coral available in the early summer perennial garden. Earlier than daylilies, more vivid than most coreopsis, and carried on stems airy enough to blend into almost any planting combination. The color is the reason this plant earns its trial garden position. Totally Tangerine is a specific coral that photographs dramatically and reads clearly from across the garden in a way that similar toned plants don't match. Hardy zones 4 through 8. Consistent moisture but not wet feet. Part shade in southern zones, full sun in northern ones. If you've been buying fancy echinacea hybrids for early coral color and watching them underperform by year 2, Geum Totally Tangerine has a 5-year trial garden track record and 12 weeks of documented bloom. The comparison is worth making before the next nursery trip. Number 7 is Achillea Coronation Gold. If you have bought fancy yarrow hybrids, Strawberry Seduction, Paprika, Pink Grapefruit, and watched them fade and revert to plain white by year 3, this is the conversation you needed before you spent that money. Coronation Gold is the yarrow that doesn't revert. Bred around 1953 by the German plantsman Heinz Close, it has been growing reliably in American gardens for over 70 years, and the trial gardens keep recommending it for one simple reason: it delivers the same performance every season without declining. 3 feet tall. Bright golden yellow flat flower heads 4 inches across from June through September. 4 months of bloom from a single division. The flowers dry on the stem and hold ornamentally through October, extending the visual contribution well beyond the active bloom season. Hardy zones 3 through 9. Drought-proof, deer-resistant, cold hardy to the most brutal northern winters and heat-tolerant through zone 9 summers. The heritage cultivars of Achillea, Coronation Gold, Moonshine, Gold Plate, are reliable for 15-plus years in most American zones. The fancy color hybrids are not. Same $15 at the nursery, completely different 30-year outcome. Number 6 is Helenium Mardi Gras. The common name is sneezeweed. It does not cause sneezing. The name comes from Native Americans using dried foliage as snuff, a historical footnote that has saddled one of the most valuable late-season perennials in American horticulture with a name that keeps it out of gardens it deserves to be in. 42 inches tall, daisy-like flowers in copper, orange, gold, and red, multiple warm tones on a single plant simultaneously, from late July through October. 3 months of late summer color when most perennials are winding down and the border desperately needs something to carry it forward. Helenium picks up exactly where coneflowers end and bridges the gap to autumn asters with a color intensity that nothing else in that window provides. Hardy zones 3 through 8. Native to North American wet meadows, meaning it tolerates the consistently moist soil and clay conditions that kill most other long bloomers. Late-season migrating monarchs work it through October. The compact selection, short and sassy, is half the height and self-supporting, eliminating the staking requirement of taller varieties while delivering the same bloom window. Number 5 is Salvia Maynight. It was the Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year in 1997. 27 years later, it is still on every trial garden's recommended list for long bloom performance, and the reason is simple: it does not quit. 18 inches tall, dense violet-blue flower spikes from late May through June. Then the management move that converts 3 months into 5. Cut the top third off the entire plant in mid-June with head shears. 3 weeks later, a full second wave. Light deadheading through August produces a third flush. 5 months of violet blue from one division across zones 4 through 8. The variety name matters. May Night and Caradonna are the two with documented long bloom track records in trial gardens. The unnamed Salvia X sylvestris at the garden center may or may not perform equivalently. Pay attention to the label. The variety name is the difference between 5 months of bloom and 6 weeks. Number 4 is Catmint Walker's Low. Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year 2007. It grows 24 to 30 inches tall with clouds of lavender blue flower spikes from late April through October. 6 months of bloom with 2 cutbacks per season. The bloom time is what earned it the award. Long blooming and vigorous spreading are not opposing qualities in this plant. They are the same trait expressed 2 different ways. If the spreading habit is too generous for your border, Cat's Pajamas is the compact version. Half the size, same 6-month bloom period, no flopping. Hardy zones 4 through 8. Drought tolerant, deer resistant. Bumblebees work every spike from May through September. Number 3 is Black-Eyed Susan Goldstrom, Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year 1999. 24 to 30 inches tall. Golden yellow daisy flowers around deep chocolate brown center cones from July through October. 3 to 4 months of bloom from a single division. The seed heads stand through winter, feeding finches on cold January mornings. Hardy zones 3 through 9 in any soil that drains, in light from full sun to half shade. The most widely planted perennial in American commercial and municipal landscapes for 30 years. There is a reason. Number 2 is Daylily Stella de Oro. 12 inches tall. Buttery yellow trumpet flowers from late May through October. 5 straight months of bloom from one crown. The American Hemerocallis Society awarded Stella de Oro the Stout Silver Medal in 1985, the highest honor in daylily breeding. 40 years later, it remains the best-selling daylily in America. Hardy zones 3 through 9. Cold hardy to 40 below 0 Fahrenheit. Drought-proof. Plant 3 crowns in May. Cut back spent stalks once in November. That is the entire annual maintenance schedule for 5 months of continuous yellow bloom every year for the next 2 decades. Number 1 is Coreopsis Moonbeam, Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year 1992. One of the very first plants the program ever honored, and in the judgment of trial gardens across the country, still the most consequential long-blooming perennial ever introduced to American horticulture. 2 feet tall, thread-leaf foliage that holds its form through wind, rain, and drought. From late May through October, 5 straight months, it produces pale lemon-yellow daisy flowers 1 inch across by the hundreds simultaneously. Not by the dozen, by the hundreds per plant. No perennial on this list produces more individual flowers per square foot per season. Hardy zones 3 through 9. Drought-resistant, deer-resistant. Cut back to half height in mid-July, and the plant produces a second full wave by mid-August. Deadheading is optional. Moonbeam blooms either way. 34 years on the market. Still the best-selling Coreopsis. Still the trial garden's first answer when someone asks what the longest blooming perennial in American horticulture is. 3 principles that separate gardeners who get the full season from those who wonder why long bloomers stop in July. The variety name is the decision. For Veronica, Salvia, Catmint, and Yarrow specifically, the named cultivar determines the bloom duration. The unnamed version of the same species at the garden center may deliver 6 weeks. The correct named cultivar delivers 5 months. Read the label. Pay for the name. The mid-season cutback is not optional. For Salvia, Catmint, Coreopsis, and Helenium, the second and third flush of bloom that converts a good performer into a 5-month performer requires a deliberate cutback at a specific moment. Miss it, and the plant shifts into seed production. Make it, and the bloom season nearly doubles. Lean soil produces more bloom than rich soil for most plants on this list. Yarrow, Gaura, Canadia, and Erigeron all bloom harder in poor, dry conditions than in heavily amended beds. Fertilizing these plants produces more foliage and fewer flowers. The neglect that feels like inadequate gardening is often the condition producing the most bloom. 13 perennials, trial garden proven, May planted, blooming from establishment through the first killing frost. Drop a comment telling me the longest blooming perennial in your garden and how many years it has been there. The old long bloomers have the best stories. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.